But it is fair to say such a meeting is without precedent and highlights both what's happened with the cooperation at a state level in Australia, and then also the mutual importance of our two countries and economies to each other. Both our countries' strong record on fighting the virus has placed us in the enviable position of being able to plan the next stage in our economic rebuild and to include Trans-Tasman travel and engagement in our strategy. On to the segment loosely called Kiwi Ingenuity. I know that the biggest agricultural event in the Southern Hemisphere, our National Field Days, is still hoping to go ahead later this year. And this is an incredibly welcome plan that they maintain, considering the economic shot in the arm it gives our rural services sector. More than $500 million in sales last year, and the flow on that has for our regional communities, $183 million for the Waikato alone. But like many events across the country, they're planning to host these again only when it's safe to do so, and so that work continues. But in the meantime, that mid-June gap in the calendar will be filled with Field Days Online, a virtual event I know the Field Days Society has been working on for some time, and one that can bring hundreds of exhibitors together, helping connect New Zealand and international companies at a time when our borders are closed. The world wants our quality food and fibre, and perhaps now more than ever, our high-quality ideas as well. Okay, everyone, I'm happy to take your questions.
With the Trans-Tasman bubble, what's the likely timing on it? You've always said it was quite long term. Can you give us some idea of whether it's weeks or months away?
I wouldn't say that it would be in the very, very near short term. But look, that's something I'm happy to update you on. Once I've had that chance to speak directly with premiers and PM Morrison. But it's fair to say from the conversations we've had to date, we have a very similar perspective of the kind of timeline that both countries will want to run to. In our minds, the health of our people is incredibly important. In New Zealand, we don't want to give away the gains we've made, and nor does Australia want to see any risks either. But we also see a lot of opportunity. It's fair to say there are significant advantages for New Zealand in terms of a Trans-Tasman bubble, not only, of course, domestic tourism, but equally we have a flow of people travelling between both countries for business purposes, trade and so on. So it is to our advantage, but equally I will say that PM Morrison has equally articulated huge advantage for New Zealand from Australia from our travel opening up to them as well.
What does not the very, very near short term mean?
Don't expect this to happen in a couple of weeks' time. As you can imagine, we need to make sure that we're locking in the gains that all New Zealanders have helped us achieve, and make sure that we have health precautions in place to make sure we do this safely and well.
Beaming into the Cabinet meeting tomorrow. Has that ever been done before? How unprecedented is that?
No, I don't believe it has been done before. We have had occasion where I believe Australian Prime Ministers have attended New Zealand's Cabinet with ministers, but as far as I understand, we haven't had something quite like this. In part, that's because of the unprecedented gathering together that's been happening within Australia as well.
Have you had any specific advice drawn up on this Trans-Tasman bubble? Is there a draft cabinet paper that you've looked at?
At this stage, we are working through a number of decisions around the border relating to both the ongoing quarantine and the way that will continue to work. You will have already heard me talk about the need to resolve issues around the ongoing funding of the quarantine mechanism. We'll need to, of course, then assess the ongoing movement of New Zealanders. And then within that, we're also looking at the Trans-Tasman bubble. This is not an issue Cabinet has formally considered today. It's really at a point at the moment where ministers, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and myself are discussing it with our counterparts.
Just to confirm, the idea of it wouldn't just be that they could travel here, it would actually be they could travel here and not have the 14 days quarantine. Because it wouldn't make much sense if they still had to wait the 14 days.
Yeah, so it is about really considering ourselves within a bubble where we feel secure that the relative response on both sides of the Tasman gives the assurance that that won't be required. So you can see why it is going to take us a bit of time to make sure we can do that safely.
ski season? Is there any
Sorry?
hope, is there any hope for a winter ski season?
I'll give you further updates tomorrow. At this point, I do want to just moderate expectations, but the fact that we're even in a position as countries to have this conversation is a huge advantage to both of us.
Can that happen at level 2, considering other Pacific nations in the Trans-Tasman bubble?
Yeah, at the moment we are focused on Australia, but it is fair to say that there would be obviously particularly advantage for our Pacific Island neighbours, but that's a conversation we'd need to have directly with them. There is huge risk if COVID finds its way currently into Pacific Island nations that have been untouched by COVID. So I would want us to act cautiously and in unison with the leaders of those countries.
How concerned are you that the actions of a minority have potentially derailed our chances of going to level 2?
Yeah, we are a team of 5 million, and that means no one wants to see people let the side down. I would still note that this is not the majority, but there are a small number of people who are forgetting that any gains you're seeing at the moment are actually from the lockdown period. We need to stay here a while longer, feel assured that we actually have this under control, and then move. People are jeopardising...
The New Zealand Prime Minister continues on Channel 604, COVID-19, our dedicated channel, talking there about the Trans-Tasman bubble, this idea of opening up travel and trade only between Australia and New Zealand as a starting point. And she's going to be attending a national cabinet meeting tomorrow. She'll be obviously attending that virtually with the Prime Minister and other state and territory leaders. But that's the first time that's happened, a New Zealand PM attending a cabinet meeting, and certainly a national cabinet meeting held by Australia. But movements still towards that Trans-Tasman bubble. She said not within a few weeks, but they're not in that immediate short term, but something that they're very much looking at seriously to open up travel, tourism and trade between Australia and New Zealand.